working through a overarching philosophy, theology of family relationships, of marriage relationships. And we've tried to make it palatable, or to be able to get our arms around it. We've tried to create an illustration or some way that we can kind of synthesize it all at once. And so we said, let's take and draw a house, and above that house we have a philosophical, theological starting point, this overarching theme that's going to define everything that happens, that we want to treat the people we love the way God treats the people He loves. We want to treat our children the way God treats His children. We want to treat our spouse the way God treats His spouse. And the one word that really nails what that is His grace. We want to treat them gracefully. And then we've been defining what His grace looks like. And we drew that house, and we said, and we also have a little wooden example of it. We've done this many different ways. And we drew that house, and we said, it starts with a foundational relationship with Jesus Christ through salvation, through His work on the cross, and then we can work through this thing at levels that we dial in on their inner needs, their three inner needs. We set their hearts free. We build character, and then we aim them at something bigger than life, something bigger than themselves, true greatness, something that's eternal. That when our lives are focused on a bigger eternal theme, then time and space makes more sense. And then we've put those into very specific things, and we said there's three inner needs, there's four freedoms, there's six character traits, there's four qualities, and now we want to unpack those. The only ones we're not going to have time to unpack are the six character traits, although in Q&A, if somebody throws a question, I can rattle through them real fast for you. And what we want to do is let's go to the second level first, and let's look at the four freedoms that God gives to our heart. And all we're saying is, if we want to treat our kids or our spouse the way God treats us, what does He do to us? Well, He sets our hearts free. See, first of all, God made us, didn't He? He knows how we're hardwired. He hardwired us to be free. Not free to do whatever we want to do. That is not freedom, that's license. And license leads to what? Anarchy. He says, no, I want you to be free to be able to do and be what I designed you to be. And that's why tyranny, governments that have tyranny, or governments that confine and limit you, things like communism, why communism is so hard on people, because it basically confines their potential rather than it explodes their potential. And limits all their possibilities instead of expands their possibilities. And so I think, He said, I came to set your hearts free, and you will be free indeed. So what does that look like? Because the communism of Christianity is legalism. It's legalism. It's defining the Christian life by behavior, many times behavior way beyond what the Bible explains, and then saying it is of the Lord, and then imposing that on a person, and then worse, connecting blessing and relationship to their ability to maintain that. Now, doesn't that sound like also communism? You will stay in good favor with the Communist Party if you do exactly what we say and what we say a good communist does. You stop doing that, you're going to look down the barrel of our gun. You will incur our wrath. You will feel our rejection. Well, that's the same thing in legalism. And see, that's why it's so foreign to the gospel, and yet many times it's exactly how the gospel is presented to people. And we must fight against this with everything we've got, because Jesus shed a whole lot of blood and paid an enormous price to set us free. And I think it insults the cross and insults the gospel when we're not diligent about calling people to the full, completed work of Christ in their life. Okay, there you go. So let's talk first of the first freedom. I want to talk of the first two freedoms, and then Darcy's going to talk on the third, and Corey on the fourth. And the first freedom I want to look at is the freedom to be different. The freedom to be different. See, what does legalism call for? It calls for us to all be the same. It calls for uniformity, doesn't it? But God's grace says, no, I want to give you the freedom to be different. To be, what are other words you can think of? Unique? One of a kind? Our Army had the U.S. Army had a theme, be all that you can be. Okay? But that's a good theme for grace, too. Be all that you can be in the power of the Lord. Well, the problem is that to be all that you can be might be a little frightening to people as they watch you take that on. Like some of you work with addicts. Where's my friend that works with the addicts? He was here just a second ago. And oh yeah, you work with addicts. Yes. And so when you get in that world, that can be frightening to people who watch it. And they might even question methodology, but they have no clue what it takes to do that. Or work with people in prisons. Or work with the artists, the music and the artistic people. I call them the arts and croissants folks. I mean, they're just from a different world, but it takes it. So, let me give you some synonyms for different so you know what I mean. Weird. God gives you the freedom to be weird. Bizarre. You know that word? B-I-Z-A-R-R-E. Bizarre. Strange. That's another synonym I think that God gives us the freedom to be. I love this word. Quirky. You know that word quirky? Just kind of goofy. Eccentric. Quirky. I love those words because, you see, a performance-based home has no room for those kind of kids. A legalistic home has no room for weird, bizarre, strange, goofy, quirky kids, and a fear-based Christian family has no room for weird, bizarre, strange, goofy, quirky kids. A grace-based home welcomes them, celebrates them. They get such a kick out of those kind of kids. Now think about it. You have little children. Let's say you have little girls. How many have daughters? Daughters? Okay, daughters. Let's say you only have an only daughter. She is never playing by herself, even though she's in a room completely alone. Little girls always have friends, even if they're imaginary. They're always playing with somebody, correct? And they personify whatever they have. They name everything. They name every doll. If you gave her 4 rocks to play with, she'd make a family out of them. This is the daddy rock. His name is Earl, and this is Mama, and then these are all that stuff. They're very that's a girl, right? You give her Barbie. Y'all have Barbie dolls? You give her Barbie dolls, she'll make a TV show. Do you have some of those TV shows at your thing where 4 or 5 women sit and talk in the morning, about things? She'll play that. There's one in America called The View. You give her 4 or 5 Barbie dolls, she'll play The View. And they're all debating. Now, she has a little brother. What does he do? For play, he goes and runs his head into a tree. Just boom, and hits the tree. Does a headbutt right into the tree. What are you, crazy? And then he'll do it into the wall. He's a little boy. They do headbutts into hard objects. They're weird. If he comes in and sees his sister playing with Barbies, and he picks one up, what does he do with it? He doesn't talk with it. He bites its head off and throws it like it's a hand grenade and makes explosive sounds. He's a little boy. He's weird. Now, we could get all upset about this, or we just say, they're just kids. Let them have fun. Who cares? Let them enjoy it. Then they become teenagers. Your son goes over to a friend's house. He says to his friend, I'm thinking about changing my hairstyle. His friend says, I'll help. He says, look, lie face down in the grass And he lies down, face down, and his friend gets out the weed whacker thing, you know, the thing, a little with a string on it goes around, and goes all over his head. And then they go into his mother's bathroom and says, listen, I think she's got some stuff that'll make this interesting. And he gets up and he gets all the hair color things down and pours it in the sink and mixes it all up and puts it in his hair. And it comes out a little green and a little blue and a little pink and a little yellow to gold. And he spikes it out. And then he goes home to show his mother his new hairdo. Now, if his mother's a legalist or a performance-based Christian, she might look at him and say something like, I don't think Jesus is very pleased with your hair. Now let's think about that statement. I don't think Jesus is very pleased with your hair. I actually heard that line. I grew up in an era, when I was a teenager, I don't know if you ever heard of our famous decade in the 1960s. But the 1960s were a very turbulent time, and we have a friend here that lived through them. And Darcy and I actually, we saw the Beatles. Darcy and I saw the Beatles. Now, we were at the same concert. We hadn't met each other yet. She was one of the 12-year-olds screaming, and I was one of the 14-year-olds saying, would all the girls just shut up so I could hear the Beatles? But anyway. But it was a time we all had long hair, and then, but my family, we in our first decade and a half of our life, we were in a very legalistic church. So you heard a lot of, boy, I don't think Jesus would be very pleased with your hair, Tim. You know, and being a youth pastor and also a person that works with families, I've heard this in decades. You know, because hairstyles go through the long hair and wild stuff's coming back. It's been conservative, it'll come back. It just cycles through. And I would hear this stuff. And so one of the things I do for my Bible reading every year is I read through the Bible. I just do a cover to cover on the Bible year after year. And it's just been my easier way to just stay on it. And but one of the advantages of that is that if you have a question about what does the Bible say about something, in January you can write it on a little note on January 1st, is it your bookmark? And you say, hey, keep an eye out for this. And so one year I put it, because I had been refereeing these fights between parents and kids, I wrote keep your eye out for what God has to say about hair in the Bible. I was just curious. Okay, now, I have read the entire Bible on this one. And I can testify what God has to say about hair. He basically says, I don't care. I don't care, it's your hair. Do what you want. Express yourself. You can use it as a lab experiment for all I care. In fact, some of you men, you might want to grab the chance while you can. Because it's going to bail. Yeah, because it's going to bail on you right before it's over. Mine's thinning out too. It's just, you know, you're not going to have much to play with, so grab it while you can. He doesn't care. It's our hair. Now, can parents make arbitrary rules about their kids' hair? And the answer is yes. You're the parent. You can do that. But when we make it a biblical or moral issue is where we get in trouble. And that's where grace leaves the scene. When we say, I don't think Jesus would be very pleased with your hair, we have just shoved a wedge between that kid's heart and God and that kid's heart and ourselves. And we've broken one of the big 10. You know, remember the 10 commandments that were etched in stone? That God gave to Moses? We just broke one of those when we say something like that. Do you know which one? Which one do you think it is?
Don't lie.
Well, lying would be one, but taking God's name in vain. Misapplying God's name to your personal agenda. Legalists do this all the time. Are you with me on this? Does this make any sense? And so legalists do this all the time. And we think nothing of it. But he's saying, wait a minute. I think we distill that commandment down to cursing and profanity. And although that could be an example of it, I think the far bigger one, the far bigger crimes of that happen in pulpits across the country, across the world, where we take personal agenda, we put God's stamp of approval on it, give it maybe even a out of context biblical back up, and then we get our way to impose that on our children or our friends or our spouse. God doesn't care. So I can have arbitrary, I could have, as a parent, I can say, hey, look, for our family, for what we're up to, and here's what, guys, here's what I want you to do, or girl, that's fine. But it's just for our family. And you got to decide, is this a hill you want to die on? Because what if the styles really change? Or what if you have a kid that's very stylish? You have a girl that really is into that kind of stuff. Is it worth fighting her on this when it really doesn't matter? We have a son named Colt. Colt is our youngest son. And I was speaking at a church in Miami, Florida. So if you know our country, it's all the way over to the, if you look at the United States, it's all the way over to the right and down at the very point of that long stem that comes down here. And we live over in Arizona, the other side. And I was actually done with church, and I was in a taxi going to the airport when my phone went off. And it was Colt, our son. And he said, Dad, it's spring break. Yeah, I know. We're going to have a lot of fun this week. He said, Dad, I was wondering, can I have a mohawk? Do you all know what a mohawk haircut is? The mohawk haircut is actually based on a tribe of Native American Indians in the U.S. They were called Mohawk Indians, and they shaved their head on the side, and then they had this big thing in the middle, and it was a kind of a frightening look, and they wanted it to be that way. They wanted to scare you with this thing, and it was also quite majestic. That's the Mohawk Indian. That's where God is worked. Now, you also need to know something else. At the beginning of the year, Colt had asked me, Dad, can I grow my hair real long this year? And I had said, give it your best shot. You're going to have to grow it a long time before it's as long as mine was when I was your age. But give it your best shot. And so he had grown his hair out, and he had real long hair. And he's 6'4". He hit his height about 7th grade, and then he stayed there. So he was tall for he was now in grade 7, 8. And so I said, sure. I thought about it, and I said, yeah, you can have a mohawk. In fact, I'll tell you what, I'm coming home, I'm flying home, I'll be getting into the house about 7 o'clock tonight. I'll cut you a great mohawk. Okay? And you can have it all week, but we're going to have to shave it off on Saturday because your school doesn't allow mohawks. But it's spring break. So I said, sure, for spring break. Now, you got to also, so he said, great, Dad. He hung up, I hung up. Now, you need to know something. I was calculating in something. I was calculating in church. When was I getting home? 7 o'clock Sunday evening. We go to a large metropolitan church, and at that time, all the major youth gatherings were at 4:30 in the afternoon, along with two major services in the evening. And so there would be, 1,500, 2,000 people on the campus about that time, with all the kids and everything else. And I was thinking, okay, church will be over. I'm cutting it off next Saturday before the next church. Okay, fine. I calculated that in. He hung up the phone. His sister Shiloh was listening. Shiloh said, what did Dad say? He said, I can have a mohawk. He's going to cut it for me when he gets home tonight from the airport. She said, I know how to cut one of those. So they got out the clippers, and they cut him a mohawk that afternoon. They took Elmer's glue and glued the top up. Elmer's glue, and glued that sucker up. And he went to church. Now, I'm sure that he sucked the wind out of a lot of people's lungs. And the older people were wondering what happened to security at this church. And I'm sure some recognized him and were thinking, isn't that the son of the guy that writes the books about parenting? But there was a man out in between the two services that happened to see Colt across the campus, and it was our senior pastor at the time, a man named Darryl. And Darryl was talking, and he looked over and he saw Colt. He said, Colt, is that you, Colt? Colt Kimmel, get over here, get over here. And Colt came walking over there. He said, that's the best mohawk I've ever seen. That is incredible. How do you get it to stay up that way? glue, and then he went on, he went on and on about, wow, I wish I had a camera. I would love to have a picture of me and you with your mohawk, and I put it in my study. See, here's something you need to realize, and this is very important. We took our kids to a grace-based church. It was very important to us that the church we took our kids to that the people in charge knew what matters and what doesn't matter. And the senior pastor knows what matters is the heart of this kid, not the hair of this kid. Could you imagine Jesus being upset with somebody's long hair or short? He doesn't. In fact, remember when he sent Samuel out to anoint a new king. He goes over to Jesse's house, and he has all these strapping, handsome, good, and they come, and he's God said, nope. And then finally he said, is this all your brothers? Well, we have David, but he's the runt of the litter. He's out keeping the sheep. And David was, when I picture David coming in, if we put him in today's equivalent, I picture a guy with skinny jeans, maybe some things in his, big things in his, and some stuff in his, and his hair weird, because he was an artist. He was a singer, right? He wrote music. He was a hummer. He was always humming. He got music in his head. He was a very artsy type of guy. Now, you don't want to mess with him when you insult his God and he has to have his slingshot in his hand. He was also a man's man. But God said, there he is. And what was he looking at? Not the outside, the heart. And our son Colt had a great heart. And so grace comes, we give them the freedom to be different. Now look, often we don't extend grace to our children because their differences annoy us or embarrass us. They annoy us or embarrass us. And it's easy to assume that what they're doing is wrong instead of different. Now why would they embarrass us? Because we all have unique individual tastes, don't we? So if your taste is different from mine and you happen to be an extension of my name or my ego, and you don't comply with my taste, then I think that reflects poorly on me. What is that? That's looking through the me lens, isn't it? Or it's taking the love-if lens and connecting relationship to their behavior. Or worse, dropping God's name to heavy-hand them into your private agenda. All these things are the antithesis of God's heart of grace. God doesn't do this to us. Why would we ever do it to them? And if we want them to have a passionate heart for God, how can we ever embed that in them if we're contradicting it in the way we treat them? Does this make sense? And so, as family pastors and counselors, we want to work overtime to solve this problem, not by giving them rules and regulations, but by taking their heart back to the cross and helping them understand what it means to truly be transformed by the power and presence of God's truth and grace. That makes sense? Okay. So, letter C says, although parents may establish arbitrary rules, they must avoid making them moral or biblical issues. Arbitrary means there's no necessary rule here. It's just that we're calling. Do you know what it means to call an audible? They probably wouldn't know that. You know the American game football, our American thing of football that they wear helmets and stuff like that. They go back and they huddle up before each play, and they turn around, and the quarterback says, "Okay, we're going to run this play," right? Then they walk up to the line, and if you've ever seen an American football game, he's calling out a cadence. He's saying, "Blue 52," or something like that. Well, when he walks up there and he sees their defense, he realizes this play isn't going to work for them. So he has a way he can put out either a color or a number that signals to them, I'm changing the play right here. And then what comes next, it tells them, no, we're going to run this one. He's calling an audible right there. He's saying, what we thought was going to work isn't going to work. So we would call an audible with our kids. We're going to a funeral. Put on a suit. We're going to a wedding. Now, you got to dress up a little bit nicer for that. We're having company. We're going to have to do this. We call audibles. And they had no problem with that because it's a reasonable audible. Let's do it. All right, let's look at the next one. Oh, one more thing. And also look at this, Proverbs 22:6. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Chuck Swindoll did some wonderful work in the Hebrew on this one. And if you took the literal Hebrew rendering of this, because we tend to look at this, train up a child in the way he should go, we think what that means is, what does a good Christian kid look like? And what does a real good Christian kid do and all that stuff? And then when he's old, he'll act like that. See, everything I just said has nothing to do with the relationship with God. I could teach an unbeliever to look like a good Christian, correct? And so he says, no, he says that literally means train up a child according to their unique inner bents. In other words, God has kind of hardwired them in a certain direction. Find out what that is and train them up accordingly. So if I have a kid that's very artsy, I'm going to give them a lot of freedom to express. If I have a kid that's very serious, I'm going to train them up with that. If I have a kid that's very friendly and adventurous and funny, I work accordingly. And then, look, letter D, it is much easier to extend this freedom to be different to our children when we can know and appreciate the unique way God made them. Our ministry has worked with another ministry. We created a thing called the Kids Flag Page. I do not have time to go into it, but it's a game that can be played with children to help them, help parents figure out their unique hardwire, their bents. There's basically 4 personality types. They go all the way back to Plato's day. He gave them Greek words: choleric, phlegmatic, sanguine, melancholy, and so forth. And they've given them different names. They've given them animal names, color names, whatever, country names, whatever. Those things help. And see, when we can figure out what that is, it's better to raise the kid with that. So maybe next time we come back, we'll be able to show you that. And we only have an English version of it, but I think it will work with you folks. Let's look at number 2. Grace-based parents give their children the freedom to be vulnerable. To be vulnerable. Meaning, we raise kids in an environment where they're not required to wear masks over their feelings, where they don't feel they have to always be protecting their heart. Children should be able to show their fears and inadequacies without dread of humiliation. And a grace-based parent encourages their children to be vulnerable by showing great respect for all their feelings. Would you say that it's fair to conclude that a lot of adults that you are around do a lot of their thinkings with their feelings? They do a lot of their thinkings with their feelings. Is that a fair thing to assess? Now, feelings play a big part of our life, but feelings don't think very well, and here's why. They really don't have a capacity to think. They only know how to feel. It's the cognitive side of our brain that knows how to think. And so if we do our thinking with our feelings, we're going to get misguided, because feelings do not have to tell us the truth. They don't have to be accurate. They just have to feel. They're free agents. Well, I think the reason a lot of adults think with their feelings is because they were not allowed to express their feelings in a safe haven as children. They didn't learn how to process feelings in a safe way, in safe harbor, so now their feelings hold them hostage as an adult. And see, grace makes room for that. Let me give you an example from my life. In U.S., we junior high is 7th, 8th grade. 7th, 8th grade. I don't know what it is where you guys are, but I was in junior high, and I finished up my 8th grade, and now I'm going to go to high school. High school is 9, 10, 11, 12. And I was very excited because we were going to go to this big high school. There were thousands of students. I was going to play football for their famous coach there, winning coach, and the girls were prettier. The rock and roll was louder. I thought, this is going to be great. But in between my 8th and 9th year of school, several hundred of us incoming freshmen is what we call 9th grade, freshmen, got letters from the Board of Education saying, the school is too crowded, we don't have room for everybody, and so you are going to be annexed to an elementary school in downtown Annapolis. Annapolis was the town in Maryland I was in. So instead of going to the big high school with all the pretty girls, we were annexed to a little elementary school with just a couple hundred of us. And so there's a lot of trade-offs and all that and all. But the biggest one was in physical education, because normally for physical education at the big school, we would put on a phys ed outfit and go out and play, and it's a humid climate, so you sweat a lot. No problem. You come back in, take a shower, put on your school clothes. We didn't have that option. We had to do everything in our school clothes. There was a gymnasium on the second floor of a building a couple blocks from the elementary school, and that's where we did phys ed in the wintertime. I went into there for my physical education class one morning, and I got very excited because there was a trampoline opened in the middle of the gymnasium. And I got excited because I'd never jumped on one before. It would be my first time on a trampoline. Because they weren't in backyards back then, equipment like that, like they are now. I got very excited. Well, the coach came out, our phys ed coach came out, and we were all surrounding the thing, and he looked around the trampoline, and he came back to me. He says, Kimmel, take off your shoes, leave on your socks, climb up here, follow my instructions. So I pulled my shoes off, and as I did, I realized I had holes in both of my socks. Not one, both. And one of my friends thought everybody should recognize this. And so he went, oh, isn't this sad? Look at Tim's toes sticking out. We need to take up a collection, buy Tim some new good socks. Now, were that to happen to me now at my age, I could care less what people think about how I look at my age. But when you're in that quarter of time, that 13, 14, 15, 16, that's a time when kids are unusually self-conscious, right? Aren't we? Very self-conscious and fragile about things like that. So it became a very embarrassing moment for me. So I was up there and I was jumping and I was doing exactly what the coach was telling me to do. And I was following his instructions, but all I was thinking about was my toes sticking out. And when I stood down and the other guys were jumping, I was saying, I'm going to go home, I'm going to get out my sock drawer, I'm going to darn every pair of socks. I will never let myself be found in this situation again. When the class was over, the coach dismissed everybody and he took off. I went and got on my shoes, went over, got my books and my jacket from the stage at the end of the thing, and I went out a side door, and I was going down these stairs when I hear my name. Kimmel! Wait up. It was the coach. He came down, he pulled me to the side, said, Tim, I want to tell you why I called on you to do the demonstration. Tim, you're the most agile student in my class. And then he reached down and he pulled off his tennis shoe, and he had a big old hole in his sock, and he's standing there wiggling his toes. He said, you know, us agile guys are tough on socks. He says, now go to class. So I'm heading over to class. And the whole way I'm thinking, what's agile? Because I'd never heard the word before. I was kind of a marginal student, but they had a big dictionary in the class I was going to, and I went over and looked it up, and I read for the first time in my life that I could move with speed, ease, elegance, and liveliness. And I also read for the first time in my life that I was mentally alert and quick-witted. No one had ever told me that before. I wrote it down. And I memorized it. And I also did a 180-degree turn in two major areas of my life, academics and athletics. In fact, a couple weeks later, they had a challenge. Who can do the most sit-ups in the 9th grade? I set the record that year. I kept going and going and going. In fact, I kept going through phys ed class, through English class, and through lunch. They were sending runners out. What she was up to. My stomach muscles hurt for several days after that. But I didn't care because I was agile. Now, it took me a while to put all the pieces together to figure out why the coach disappeared so quickly after class. He had to get into his office, get his shoe off, get the scissors out, cut the hole in his sock, put them back on, and run me down. He didn't go around with holes in his socks. He's a phys ed coach. They get new shoes and socks all the time. But he saw a vulnerable kid that needed help. And he touched his life with grace. Now listen, our children have these kind of moments all the time. All the time. Someone has described childhood and adolescence as a 24-hour day, 7-day a week, 365-day a year battle to keep from being embarrassed. They need grace waiting for them. We give them the freedom to be different, the freedom to be vulnerable. Darcy, come on up here and talk to them.
Well, the third freedom that we want to give our kids is the freedom to be candid, A lot of people think that candid is the same thing as honesty, where candid includes honesty, but honesty can sometimes be very cruel I don't know if you have the kind of the talk shows that we do in the States, but there's a show called the Jerry Springer Show. And what usually happens on that show is some person comes out and they think they're going to kind of share what's going on in their life. And then someone from their past comes out and just lets them have it. And is very disrespectful, yells at them. And the whole time, it's on TV, and they weren't aware that it was going to happen. And so honesty can be very cruel. What we're talking about is honesty with the best interest of the other person involved, and that's candor. When you're candid, you're doing it because you've got the best interests of that person at heart. We have to make it easy then for our children to voice the things that are troubling their heart. I mean, we do things that bother them. They have things that are bothering their heart. And so we need to make it possible for them in a safe environment to share those things with us. We have no problem telling them when they're bothering us, do we? Nope. As soon as that happens, you know, we can really let them know that they've done something that is not acceptable anymore. And so we need to create an environment where they feel free to tell us. It might be a sin or a temptation that is troubling their heart, and they need to talk about it with someone. I remember a time when I was putting one of our sons to bed, and we were talking. I was sitting on the side of the bed, and I was rubbing his back, and we were just kind of talking. And he began to share with me some new feelings that he was having about girls, and what he was experiencing physically because of those feelings. And I thought, well, you know, if I was a single mom, I would need to sit here and listen to this and help him work through it. But he has a dad, so I said, honey, would you mind if I go and got Dad, because he's probably better at talking about these things with you than I am. So Tim came in and talked with him, and that was a continuing discussion about sexuality with our kids. But he feels so free to share that, even with me. Even now, both of our boys, I don't know if you have the same things, but there's a program that you can sign up for with your computer that monitors all your web activity. And then you can choose someone to be accountable to. I forget what it's called. Uh-huh. And Tim is both of their accountability partners. So they feel free to share about a temptation or a sin. Maybe it's a doubt that they're having with their faith. I mean, our kids are on their spiritual journey. And even though they have sat under good teaching, you've read the Bible to them, they know the things that you believe, they have to grasp them themselves. And there comes a point where they're going to exchange your faith with their faith. And I remember a time when we were actually at a Christian camp in Texas, and Tim was the speaker there. And our 9-year-old daughter, Karis, had been at a program that morning while Tim was speaking. And so I picked her up from Christian camp, and she says to me, Mom, I don't know if Jesus was God. I don't know if Jesus is the only way to heaven. And I thought, oh my gosh, what are they teaching her at camp, or what's happening? You know, we have her here at camp, and she's supposed to be learning all about God, and here she has all these doubts. And I started to panic, and I thought, oh my goodness, we're going to have to sit her down and talk with her. And so we got back to our cabin, and I explained this to Tim, and he said, just settle down. He said, lighten up. You know, she's on her spiritual journey, and God is going to meet her there. And so she had the freedom to work through her faith. And then sometimes it's just a frustration that they're having with us. I mean, they need to be able to tell us when we've done something that's hurt them or embarrassed them. Cody, who is our second son, it was the end of a school year, and I remember a time when I really frustrated him. He was sitting at the piano practicing. All 4 of our children took piano lessons, and in the morning they had a 20-minute period where they all needed to practice, and it was his time. And I heard him out there just kind of fiddling around. I thought, he's really not doing what he needs to be doing. And this is a really important time of the year because at the end of the school year, he had a recital, he had a theory test to take, and he really needed to be putting his time in at the piano. So I went out there and I said, Cody, all year long we've been teaching you all these things, and you're finally going to get tested on them, and here you are fiddling around out here. And he started to cry. You know, have you ever had those situations where you just want to take your words back because you've wounded somebody? And he started to cry. I mean, he was like a 6th grader. I hadn't seen him cry in a long time. I said, oh boy. So I sat down on the piano bench with him and I said, tell me what's going on. He said, Mom, he said, I'm president of my class. I'm in the play at school. We're having a concert at school. And on and on and on. And he named 5 or 6 things that were really important that were also going on at the same time with this big recital that he had. He says, I can't do everything. I can't be the best at everything. And it was just a good reminder to me that sometimes we can push our kids too hard. And they need to be able to tell us, you know, that has really frustrated them or hurting them. Letter B says that we need to make sure that our children have an outlet for their anger or their frustration. Otherwise, they're going to stuff it. They're going to become bitter. However, if our children voice a frustration with us, they have to do it respectfully. You know, we're not giving them permission to yell at us or to say things to hurt us in return. However, the children are more inclined to speak respectfully to us when we have spoken respectfully to them. So we have to make sure that we set the pattern for airing our frustrations. And that's what Ephesians says. Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. We don't have perfect children, but they don't have perfect parents. So it's kind of you know, we're even there. And along the way, we have hoped to let them have permission to air their frustrations, but we also know we miss some of those things. So in our family, when our children were little, we started something that we did about once a month called What's Your Beef Night? Now there's an expression that says if you have a beef with someone, it kind of means you have a frustration with them. So this was What's Your Beef Night? And it was an opportunity for our kids to go around and say anything that had frustrated them or hurt them that we had not dealt with yet. They got to choose something off the Kimmel menu, and I sometimes fixed 4 different items for them, but it was a special time for them. And so they would go around and they would just say, Mom or Dad, when you did this, it really hurt me. Or when you did this, I was embarrassed. Now here's the key. We could not defend ourselves. We could not try to justify our actions. Otherwise, why were they going to share it if they were just going to get put in their place again? The only thing that we could do was say, we're sorry. We're truly sorry that this hurt you. It cleared the air in our family so often, and I think it kept our kids from packing their bags full of bitterness when they left our house. And so that's where the freedom to be candid can come into play when we're raising our kids. Corey?
I want to talk to you about grace-based parenting when it comes to our children and the freedom to make mistakes. Grace-based homes should be a place where disappointments don't define our commitment to each other. our moral setbacks are properly processed, and a child's sinful actions never mean the end of our relationship with them. The best way to explain this, I think, is maybe to give you an example. Gail and I have 4 kids. Our oldest is a boy, and then we have 3 daughters. They're all grown and married now, but when one of our daughters was out of college, she had moved out of our house, and she actually had moved to California, which is about 600 kilometers away. And she had lived there with her cousin for about 2 years. And then one evening, we're home, and she had found a boyfriend that she really liked and was getting serious with. And one evening, we got a phone call, and I could hear Gail talking on the phone with our daughter. And our daughter had called to tell us that she was going to move in with her boyfriend. And so this was a little bit of a shock to us and all. But my wife, Gail, in her wisdom, she kind of took it in stride and said, well, okay, we've moved you into every apartment that you've moved into, so Mom, Dad and I are going to drive over this weekend, and we'll help you move in with your boyfriend. And I'm thinking, what? You know, but it turns out our daughter said, no, Mom, you don't need to do that. But Gail was very insistent. No, we're coming over. We're going to be there on Friday, and we're going to help you move. And she kept saying, no, don't do that. And says, no, we're coming. And she kind of hung up the phone. I'm going, why are we doing that? And Gail said, because we've always helped our kids move, and we're going to help them move now. And so we're thinking through this whole thing. And we had 2 options. You know, if we were more of a legalistic home, we could have said, okay, daughter, we're going to cut you off. You know, this is not what we do as a family, and this is not right. You're not obeying God in this. And we could have tried to take a moral stand and alienated our daughter and her boyfriend and all. But fortunately for me, my wife took the long view in this and said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to continue to love our daughter, even through this, even though we don't agree with what she's doing here. We're going to take the long view. So we drove over that weekend and helped them move her stuff from out of her apartment into his apartment, you know. And I'm there, and she had a double bed, and so I helped her boyfriend set the bed up, you know, and all in the room they're going to be in. And then Gail says to our daughter, oh, honey, we got some extra time. Let's go make your bed, you know. And our daughter's, no. Gail said, oh, yeah, we've got time. Let's do it. And so she's burning hot coals on our daughter's head because our daughter knows that she shouldn't be doing this, you know. And but again, we were taking the long view. We were allowing our daughter to make mistakes, and we couldn't control it anyway. And so we wanted to be sure that we continued the relationship with our daughter. Now, this was years ago. Since then, she has married this young man, and they have a wonderful family and some kids and all. And today, we have a good relationship with our son-in-law, and we have a great relationship as well with our daughter, who now, if you ask her, she says and recognizes that what she did was wrong. Okay, in fact, she even works with a lot of young college girls, and she's probably the most adamant about trying to tell these college girls that how dumb it is to move in with a boyfriend, because it just puts your spiritual life on hold. But again, that's kind of an example where you have to give your children the freedom to make mistakes. Another thing you have to keep in mind is that correction, discipline, and consequences are among the highest forms of grace for children as they make mistakes. Now, this is a hard one. Again, with this same daughter, one of the things you need to know that when our daughters reached the age of puberty, we started giving them little pearls for every time they had a birthday, or if it was Christmas or Easter, we were giving them pearls as a symbol of their purity. And the whole idea for our daughters was that they would keep these pearls, both our daughters and Gail, when they first went through puberty, they went and got some white satin and made little purses, and they would keep all these pearls in their purse. And the idea was that when they got married, they're going to take all these pearls, they were going to string them together, and then they were going to wear them on their wedding day as they went down the aisle. It's kind of a symbol of their purity and whatnot. So we've got 3 girls, and we're giving all of our girls these pearls. And our first daughter gets married, and she strings her pearls in a great thing, and it looks wonderful. And then when this daughter goes to get married that had moved in with her boyfriend, she asked Gail about, oh, I got to string my pearls. And Gail said, no, honey, we're not going to do that, because we still had one daughter left at home that wasn't married, and we were still giving pearls to her, and the whole object of giving the pearls was, you're going to keep that purity while you're going. And said, honey, you didn't do that. You chose not to do that. And she was really upset with us at the time because she didn't get to wear her pearls on her wedding day. And that was a hard thing for her. But it was an important thing for our other daughters that they saw us follow through on that. Now, it turns out on her 1-year anniversary of her marriage, we strung the pearls into a necklace and then presented it to our daughter on her 1-year anniversary. So she did eventually get her pearls, but she didn't get to wear them on her wedding day. Again, because there are consequences, even though we allow our children to make mistakes, we have to follow through on consequences as well. Grace-based parenting also recognizes that when children are the hardest to love, that's when they need it the most. And I think that with our daughter in this situation, it was very difficult because, frankly, it was a little embarrassing to us, but you know what? It's not about us. It's about us having a relationship with our daughter and a potential relationship with our future son-in-law, although we didn't know it at the time. We were hoping that someday he would become our future son-in-law. And because we didn't panic or all of a sudden become legalistic at that moment, it allows us to have a great relationship with both of them today. So that really helps when you give your children the freedom to make mistakes.
God's a God of the second chance, the clean slate of the new day. And it's because he was willing to send his son to pay a price to set us free. And he says, there's therefore now no condemnation to them who are in Christ. There may be consequences for our actions, prices to pay for cause-effect, but our relationship with him is not at risk. And so we want to create homes where no matter what, the relationship is never at risk either, in our marriages, with our kids.